Elena Martinez pushed her cleaning cart across the polished marble floor of the Naval Academy's grand auditorium, the squeak of one stubborn wheel echoing through the vast space. 800 midshipmen sat in perfect formation, their attention fixed on Captain Stevens as he pointed to tactical markers on the massive battlefield map projected behind him. Elena had seen this lecture dozens of times before, always cleaning quietly in the shadows, invisible to everyone except the dust and debris she swept away daily. But today, something was different. Today, when the captain placed his marker in the wrong position, Elena couldn't stay silent anymore. She stepped forward, moved the marker to its correct location, and in that single moment, revealed a secret that had been buried for over 2 decades. The morning sun cast long shadows through the tall windows of the Naval Academy Auditorium in Annapolis as Elena Martinez methodically swept between the rows of empty seats. At 49 years old, she had perfected the art of being invisible, moving through the Academy's hallowed halls with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned that attention was rarely welcome. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her worn Navy uniform bore the permanent creases of countless wash cycles and years of honest labor. The metal bucket on her cart clinked softly against a mop handle as she navigated around the fixed seating, each movement practiced and deliberate. Elena had been working at the Academy for 9 years now, ever since she had left her previous life behind and sought the anonymity that came with manual labor in a place where rank meant everything and she had chosen to have none. The pay was modest, barely enough to cover rent on her small apartment 4 miles from campus. But it came with something more valuable than money: the ability to disappear completely into a world where she was noticed only when trash cans overflowed or floors needed mopping. The auditorium doors opened with their characteristic heavy thud, and the first wave of midshipmen began filing in for the weekly tactical strategy lecture. Elena had witnessed this same scene hundreds of times, watching young men and women in crisp uniforms take their assigned seats with military precision. Their faces were eager, hungry for knowledge that would shape them into the officers they aspired to become. She remembered that hunger, though it felt like a lifetime ago, when she had worn a similar uniform and sat in similar seats, absorbing lessons about leadership and warfare from instructors who had never seen real combat. As the midshipmen settled into their seats, Elena continued her methodical cleaning, working her way toward the back of the auditorium where she could observe without being observed. Captain Richard Stevens strode onto the stage with the confident bearing of a career naval officer, his chest decorated with ribbons that told the story of 3 decades of service. He was a competent instructor Elena had observed over the years, though his experience was largely theoretical, built on war college studies and training exercises rather than actual battlefield command. "Good morning, midshipmen." Captain Stevens' voice boomed to the sound system, filling every corner of the massive space. "Today, we'll be examining amphibious assault tactics, specifically focusing on scenarios where traditional naval doctrine must be adapted to unexpected circumstances." Elena paused in her sweeping, her grip tightening on the broom handle. She had heard variations of this lecture many times, but something in the captain's tone suggested he was venturing into territory that made her uncomfortable. Amphibious warfare was a subject she knew intimately, though she had spent 9 years trying to forget everything she had learned about it. The captain activated the projection system, and a detailed topographical map appeared on the massive screen behind him, showing coastal terrain with beaches, cliff faces, and strategic landing zones marked in different colors. Elena recognized the geography immediately, though the map showed none of the political boundaries or city names that would identify the specific location. It was a sanitized version of a place where she had once spent 8 months planning an operation that officially never happened. "Imagine you're tasked with establishing a beachhead in hostile territory," Captain Stevens continued, pointing to various features on the map with a laser pointer. Conventional doctrine would suggest focusing on the most suitable landing beaches. But what if those beaches are heavily defended? What alternatives might you consider? Several midshipmen raised their hands, offering textbook responses about alternative landing sites and diversionary tactics. Elena found herself mentally cataloging their suggestions, noting how each one would have resulted in disaster in the real situation this map represented. Captain Stevens nodded approvingly at the responses, then moved to a tactical board where he began placing markers to represent ships landing craft, and troop positions. "Let's walk through a specific scenario," he said, positioning blue markers for friendly forces and red ones for enemy positions. "Your mission is to neutralize this coastal defense installation while establishing a secure landing zone for follow-on forces." Elena watched as the captain arranged the markers according to standard tactical doctrine, creating a textbook example of how such an operation might unfold. The approach was methodical and logical, following established principles that would earn high marks on any Naval Academy exam. But Elena could see immediately that this particular arrangement would have resulted in complete mission failure, and likely the loss of hundreds of sailors and Marines. The captain's plan called for a direct assault on the main beach, supported by naval gunfire and preliminary bombardment to suppress enemy defenses. It was a kind of strategy that looked impressive on paper and satisfied the requirements of naval doctrine, but failed to account for the specific challenges of the terrain and the enemy's likely response patterns. Elena knew because she had planned the actual operation that this map represented, though the captain clearly had no idea that the scenario he was teaching was based on a real mission that had taken place 26 years earlier. Operation Neptune's Tide had been classified at the highest levels, its existence known only to a handful of senior officials and the small team of specialists who had planned and executed it. The official record stated that no such operation had ever taken place, and everyone involved had signed documents ensuring their silence for the remainder of their lives. As the captain continued explaining his tactical approach, Elena felt a familiar tension building in her chest, the same feeling she had experienced during the final planning session for Neptune's Tide, when she had realized that the initial approach would end in catastrophe. She had been a lieutenant commander then, one of the youngest strategic planners in Naval Special Warfare Command, with a reputation for seeing patterns that others missed and finding solutions to seemingly impossible problems. 12 to 1600 hours, the moment of truth. The key to success in amphibious operations, Captain Stevens was saying, is maintaining overwhelming force while adhering to proven tactical principles. By following established doctrine, we minimize risk while maximizing our chances of mission success. Elena wanted to shake her head, to call out from the back of the auditorium that overwhelming force and established doctrine had been exactly what the enemy had expected during Neptune's Tide, that the most successful amphibious operations succeeded precisely because they abandoned conventional approaches in favor of creative solutions tailored to specific circumstances. But she remained silent, continuing to push her broom across floors that were already clean, maintaining the invisibility that had protected her for 9 years. The captain moved one of the blue markers to a position that Elena knew would have been suicide for the real sailors who had executed Neptune's Tide. The enemy had positioned anti-ship missiles in the hills overlooking that exact location, and any naval force attempting to operate in that area would have been decimated within minutes. Elena had spent weeks studying satellite imagery and intelligence reports before discovering the hidden approach that had allowed the actual mission to succeed. Questions so far? Captain Stevens asked, surveying the rows of attentive midshipmen. A young woman in the third row raised her hand. "Sir, what if the enemy has positioned anti-ship missiles on the surrounding high ground? Wouldn't a direct approach expose our naval forces to unacceptable risk?" Elena felt a spark of approval. The midshipman had identified one of the key problems with the captain's plan, demonstrating the kind of tactical thinking that might keep sailors alive in real combat situations. "Excellent question, Midshipman Parker," the captain replied. "Standard doctrine calls for preliminary reconnaissance to identify and neutralize any enemy missile positions before the main assault begins. This is typically accomplished through coordinated airstrikes and special operations teams." He indicated several points on the map with his laser pointer. Elena bit her lip to keep from speaking. The missile positions the captain had indicated were all wrong, based on assumptions about enemy placement that had proven incorrect during the actual operation. The real missiles had been positioned in locations that offered concealment rather than optimal fields of fire, understanding that their job was to ambush naval forces rather than engage in prolonged combat. The lecture continued for another hour, with the captain walking the midshipmen through each phase of his theoretical operation. Elena listened with growing frustration as he made mistake after mistake, teaching future officers approaches that would have resulted in mission failure and unnecessary casualties. As the captain reached the final phase of his presentation, He moved several markers to positions that Elena knew represented the climax of Operation Neptune's Tide. This was the moment when her original planning had been most crucial, when a single incorrect decision would have meant the difference between success and catastrophe. The final assault phase requires precise coordination, Captain Stevens explained, positioning the blue markers in a formation that would have sailed directly into the enemy's strongest defensive position. By concentrating our forces at the primary landing zone, we achieved the tactical surprise necessary for mission success. Elena's hands tightened on the broom handle until her knuckles turned white. The captain's plan was exactly backwards, concentrating friendly forces in locations where the enemy expected them, and avoiding the single vulnerability that had made Neptune's Tide possible. She had discovered that vulnerability through weeks of meticulous analysis, cross-referencing intelligence reports with tidal charts and weather patterns to identify a narrow window of opportunity that had lasted less than 48 hours. Without fully realizing what she was doing, Elena set her broom against the wall and began walking down the aisle toward the stage. Her footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet auditorium as 800 midshipmen turned to watch the janitor, who had apparently lost her mind. Captain Stevens paused mid-sentence, his eyebrows raised in surprise and annoyance at the unexpected interruption. "Excuse me," he said, his tone carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "This is a closed session." Elena reached the stage and climbed the steps without responding, her eyes fixed on the tactical board where the captain's markers represented a plan that would have been a disaster. She could feel the weight of 800 pairs of eyes watching her every movement, could sense a collective intake of breath as the cleaning lady approached the sacred space where only qualified instructors were permitted. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your duties," Captain Stevens said, stepping between Elena and the tactical board. "This is a restricted area." Elena looked at him for a moment, seeing not the confident instructor, but the theoretical sailor, who had never faced the life-and-death decisions that real operations demanded. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority that had been dormant for 9 years but had never truly disappeared. "Your approach is wrong," she said simply, reaching past him to move one of the blue markers from its current position to a location that appeared to offer no tactical advantage. "The enemy positioned their primary missile battery here, not where doctrine suggests." The auditorium fell completely silent. Captain Stevens stared at her in shock, his mouth opening and closing without sound as he tried to process what had just happened. Elena continued moving markers, repositioning the entire tactical arrangement according to the plan that had actually been used during Neptune's Tide, the plan that existed in no official records but was burned into her memory with perfect clarity. "The real operation succeeded because we abandoned everything you just taught these midshipmen about conventional amphibious doctrine," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent auditorium. "Sometimes the only way to accomplish the impossible is to attempt something that appears to be suicide." She turned to face the 800 midshipmen who had been hanging on every word, their faces reflecting a mixture of confusion, excitement, and dawning recognition that they were witnessing something unprecedented. "My name is Elena Martinez. 26 years ago, I held the rank of Lieutenant Commander in the United States Navy. I was the primary strategic planner for Operation Neptune's Tide." The revelation hit the auditorium like a physical wave. Midshipmen began whispering to each other, trying to process the impossibility of what they were hearing. The woman they had seen cleaning floors and emptying trash cans for years was claiming to be one of the most legendary figures in modern naval history, someone whose very existence was officially denied. Captain Stevens was staring at Elena as if she had just claimed to be a mythological figure brought to life. "That's impossible," he said. "Lieutenant Commander Elena Martinez died in a training accident in 1998. Her death was confirmed by multiple witnesses." "Lieutenant Commander Elena Martinez did die," Elena replied. "The woman who planned Neptune's Tide ceased to exist the day the operation concluded. What you see now is what remains after someone gives up everything they were to become someone they never wanted to be." Elena moved the tactical board one final time, her fingers tracing the positions that had made victory possible when conventional wisdom said defeat was inevitable. "These midshipmen deserve better than academic theories based on outdated assumptions," she said, addressing Captain Stevens, but speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. They deserve to understand what real operations look like, what kind of thinking actually keeps sailors alive when conventional wisdom fails. She turned back to the assembled midshipmen, seeing in their faces the same hunger for knowledge she had once possessed. The most important lesson I can teach you is this. When facing an impossible problem, always question whether you're solving the right problem. Most failures in naval operations occur because commanders accept problem definitions that make success impossible. Elena gestured toward the tactical display behind her. This operation succeeded because we stopped thinking like the enemy expected us to think. Instead of overwhelming force, we used precision. Instead of conventional approaches, we found the one path they never thought to defend. Captain Stevens had gone pale, the implications of her presence finally sinking in. If you really are who you claim to be, he said carefully, then you understand the implications of what you've just revealed. Elena nodded. I've been carrying these secrets for 26 years. But watching you teach future officers tactics that would get them killed, I couldn't stay silent anymore. She looked out at the 800 faces, watching her with rapt attention. Some operations succeed precisely because their enemies never learn how they were defeated. But the principles behind those operations, the willingness to think creatively, to abandon doctrine when doctrine is enough, to find solutions that appear impossible, those principles can and should be taught. As security personnel began arriving at the auditorium's entrance, Elena gathered her cleaning supplies with the same methodical efficiency she had displayed for 9 years. "Will we ever see you again?" called out Midshipman Parker, speaking for the hundreds of future officers who had just received the most valuable lesson of their naval education. Elena paused at the auditorium's exit and turned back to face the assembled midshipmen one final time. "You'll see the results of what you learned today in every successful operation you plan, every impossible problem you solve, every time you choose creative thinking over conventional wisdom." She pushed her cart through the exit doors, leaving behind 800 future officers who would never again accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. The woman who had once planned operations that officially never existed had given them something more valuable than classified techniques or secret knowledge. She had given them permission to think beyond the boundaries that institutional education creates, and the confidence to attempt solutions that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. In the years that followed, graduates of that particular class would distinguish themselves in operations around the world, applying principles they had learned from a janitor who had stepped onto a stage and revealed that the most important naval secrets weren't hidden in classified files, but in the willingness to abandon conventional thinking when conventional thinking wasn't enough. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places, cleaning our floors, serving our food, maintaining our buildings. Elena Martinez had spent 9 years invisible, but in one moment of courage, she reminded 800 future naval officers that impossible is often just another word for untried. What about you? When you see someone in a humble job, do you wonder what stories they might be carrying? Do you recognize that expertise comes in many forms, and wisdom often wears work clothes? From which city are you watching the story of hidden brilliance and quiet courage? Share your thoughts about the unsung heroes who might be walking among us, carrying knowledge that could change the world if we just took the time to listen.